Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Crown and today we are going to have some more stories that I hope that you will enjoy. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to the channel, like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now, without further ado, let's go! So, some background information. I live in Japan, in an area where there are two major train lines. There is one train line that connects those two major lines, and it only has two cars. So one day I was riding the small train to work when the train came to a stop at a station. There were about 50 students and a couple of teachers waiting there. I, of course, was taken aback by this, because the train was already filled to the brim. Then a teacher marched to the front of the train. She had a typical Karen look. Sunglasses, haircut and stuff. She then told the students to get on the train. Before anyone had time to object, the students tried to push themselves into the train. And of course, not all of them could fit in the train. All the while, Karen was standing there, crossing her arms and glancing at her watch in every couple seconds. Then the train conductor got out of the train. I was sitting down on a window seat and could see everything, probably wondering what in the world was going on. This was the following conversation. The train conductor says, "Excuse me, ma'am, what are you doing?"
I'm trying to get my students on a train. Why?
Sorry, you can clearly see that this train is already filled to the brim. I'm going to have to ask you to get on the next one.
But I reserved this train.
This is nonsense, by the way. Excuse me, what? This is not a bullet train. You cannot reserve seats.
I know I did. I did so on the website.
Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the station immediately.
Why? I reserved this train and if you don't let us on, I'm going to call the police.
Ma'am, I'm going to ask you one last time.
No, let us on the train now.
Then a passenger of the train got out of the train. He says, "Ma'am, please leave the station now."
And who are you to boss me?
"Ma'am, please leave the station now."
Not anymore. Not with you disrespecting me.
For the third time, please leave the station now.
Shut up, you stupid jerk.
That does it. Then in all of its glory, the passenger reaches into his pocket and pulls out his police badge. The entitled teacher goes bare. She says,
"Okay, we will leave the station now."
Before she can escape with her class, a police officer grabs her arm and puts handcuffs on her wrists. Then a police officer calls for backup. Long story short, the entitled teacher got fined a lot for all the trouble, but the passengers of the train got free rides, so I guess it wasn't all that bad. Edit: for those of you wondering, the other teachers who were not paying attention to this whole thing took the students back to the school. Edit 2: I just found out she's a chaperone. The summer of 2019, me and my two friends, let's just say their names are just B and F, were walking through the park to fill up our drinks from the fountain, and there was some trash on the grass from some other kids we had been with earlier. We were walking along talking when an entitled woman confronted us. She walks over and immediately attacks us saying,
"Do you really think it's acceptable to leave all this trash on my grass?"
B tells her, "This isn't your grass though, and it wasn't us."
"I know it was you. I saw you."
We knew she couldn't have because it wasn't us. It was other people. We tried explaining this to her for a good 10 minutes or so, and the entitled mother then walked off and started picking up the trash, which is very nice of her. We thought this was the end of it, but it wasn't. When we came back from getting water, she was standing blocking the path holding a large stick. We continued walking, expecting her to move, but she started shouting something about how our generation is so disrespectful and doesn't respect other people's property. Again, this isn't her land, and we haven't done anything wrong. She then informs us that she has gone to the police station, which was on the main street next to the park, and that an officer was coming to speak to us about our littering and destruction of property. The officer came over after her, holding us on the path for a few minutes, and we explained the situation to him. The entitled mother then starts screaming at us that she will get her revenge and how we'll never disrespect her again. The officer then took us aside and told us just to quickly get away from her and the park. We walked off to the sounds of her screaming obscenities and trying to push the officer away, which didn't end well for her as she ended up in handcuffs. Since then, we thankfully haven't had any other encounters with her whenever we visited this park. So not too long after I started, and at least a couple of years before the story took place, I was called into a meeting with the store manager to discuss the situation with another co-worker. When they came to get me, I was on lunch, and so after the meeting was over, they informed me that I could restart my lunch because I was entitled to a full uninterrupted hour lunch. Since they interrupted my lunch, I got to start again, and they would adjust my time for me. I kept this information in the back of my head for future reference, which worked out well. Fast forward a bit and I'm working in the connection center, which is the department with the prepaids and contract cell phones. In our store, we were built into the electronics department, along with photo center. At the time, we and the photo center were considered a special department. We were a different division from the main store, had separate payroll, managers and so on. So technically, we were supposed to help cover each other's area, and couldn't be pulled to another department or make another department help us. In practice though, electronics would usually help our customers if we weren't there, and we would help them on things we were able to. The exception was contract cell phones. We were the only people able to do a contract. We had to run credit checks though, everything that was done through an actual cell phone store. For some reason, I no longer remember. I was alone my whole shift this day. We normally had one person, 9 to 6, and one 12 to 9. But the morning person either called off or left early, and so I was on my own. Around 3:30 or so, about a half hour before my lunch should be, I had a couple guys come by wanting to see about getting a contract cell phone. I was finishing up another sale, so I told them that if they wanted to look around, I'd be done in probably 15 minutes. They left. I finished with my customer and I didn't see them again. I waited around for them a bit, then had some other customers and so on. So I didn't leave for lunch until after 5. About 5:30 I'm close to getting locked out, and so I go to take lunch. The person working electronics is one of the few who doesn't really like our department and refuses to help our customers. So I told him I was going to lunch and just send any of our customers a photo for help if they needed anything. About 30 minutes into my lunch, I hear an announcement across the intercom of a customer needing help in the connection center. I'm in the break room, so I call up to electronics, remind them I'm on lunch, and send customers a photo or tell them I'll be back in 30 minutes. Turns out, someone just had a question about a prepaid phone card. About 10 minutes go by and I'm being paged again. This time I ignore it because they know I'm on lunch. Few minutes later they page again, and at this point I've got maybe 15 minutes left for lunch. One of the store managers comes in right after the second page. They ask me why they are paging my department and I'm not answering. Now we got 1 unpaid hour lunch and 2 paid 15-minute breaks. Since we are still on the clock during our breaks, we can be interrupted and they are not guaranteed. If it's busy, we sometimes won't get our second one. I guess because it's after 6, he assumes I'm on my last break and not lunch, and just being lazy and not wanting to go help. Because we were a specialty division and couldn't be bowled to the registers or other departments, there were a couple other departments that were like this, such as jewelry. This has all since changed. There were a couple managers who seemed to have beef with our departments and seemed to think of us as lazy or entitled because we refused to be bowled. So I start telling him that I'm the only one there and I have 15. Before I can finish my sentence, he interrupts and tells me that I can take my 15 break later. I need to go help the customer. I try again to explain that I have 15 minutes left for lunch. I'm off the clock, and I'll be up there to help them afterwards. But he isn't listening. Interrupts me again and says, "You can come restart your break after you help them.
but I need you to go help them now. A light bulb goes off in my head, and I ask,
You want me to go help the customer now? And then restart my time?
I do make sure not to say break or lunch, just time. So he rolls his eyes, says basically, I don't care, you can restart it, just go help the customer. So I say okay, gather my stuff, put it in my locker and clock in. At this point they have beached again. At this point they have beached me again, and I have maybe 10 minutes left on my lunch. I go up to the department and lo and behold, it's my customer from 3:30 who has finally come back. He wants a phone, so I ask for his ID. Tell him I'll have to run a credit check, see if he needs to pay a deposit and so on, and asks if he knows what phone, plan and so on he's interested in. Well, as soon as I tell him we will run his credit and he may have to pay something, he is not interested. He says his credit is crap, he tried getting a phone through the Sprint store and they wanted a bunch of money. But he thought since it's Wally World, we won't check his credit, and we would just hand him a phone. So it takes maybe all of 5 minutes with him, and I go ahead and help another customer with a prepaid phone, then turn to electronics and tell them okay, I have to go restart my lunch, I'll be back in an hour. When I say this, his jaw drops, and he immediately starts asking what I'm talking about. I already had lunch and yada yada yada. So I explained that no, I did not finish because management sent me to help the customer he kept bitching me about even though he knew I was at lunch. So now I needed to go retake my lunch. I go sit back in the break room and at this point it's probably 6:45. I always read and had a book with me, so I was happy to sit and read for another hour. About 30 minutes go by and the manager from earlier comes by. I think they are clocking back in from lunch. And he makes a comment about, oh, are you just now getting your break? So I say no, I'm retaking my lunch break. I have another half hour to go. He stops, and you can see the wheels slowly start to turn as he asks what do I mean. I told him that I was on my lunch earlier when he told me I needed to go help the customer, and because my lunch was interrupted, I had to restart. He of course says he thought I was on my break. Why didn't I tell him I was at lunch? And I told him I tried twice but he kept interrupting and told me to help the customer now and restart my time. So I thought he knew I was at lunch. I can still see his fat face get so red and tell me that's not at all what he meant. And he will talk to my manager tomorrow. There wasn't much fallout, I got pulled and questioned the next day, but I had messaged my boss and told her about it and the times I was at lunch to cover myself for time theft. And the photo employees backed me up on everything, including that electronics never told them a customer needed help or sent them the customer. The manager had to admit that he did tell me that I needed to go help the customer right then, and he never asked if I was on the clock or not. The assistant manager who questioned me did try to make it seem like I was being dramatic and should have just gone up when I was paged. But I just asked what would have happened if I left for lunch, as I usually did. I think it was bad weather that day, so I had stayed inside. But I normally sat in my car just to get out of the building. I would never have heard the pages, and asked if I had been given incorrect information before by the store manager, to which she agreed I was correct. I did make it known that they had talked to the customer, then called me in the break room and told me someone needed help with a contract phone. I would have probably clocked in early and went to help, and that I'd done that before. But since the first time the customer just wanted to know what car to buy and they paged me instead of helping or having a photo help them, I wasn't going to interrupt my lunch multiple times when I'm off the clock. I'm pretty sure they talked to the electronics employee because he never paged me like that again afterwards. And a couple employees who didn't know the lunch rule before learned it that day. And I got paid to read for an hour that day.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.